What's up, y'all? It's Otaku Tavern back at you with another video. Been a little while since I've been on here. If you're new to the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, click the bell notification so that you do not miss a video. Or don't. It's really whatever. Okay, so this video, I've been cooking this video up for quite a while. This one probably is going to be the video that, in my personal opinion, is going to be the best I've done. So what I want to talk about tonight is the Shadow Realm, why anime's darkest void speaks to real loneliness. And if you don't know what the Shadow Realm is, I guess you've been living under a rock, because, I mean, if you're an otaku, more than likely you know what that is. But the Shadow Realm is a place in the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, which was then, it's, still going on, like Yu-Gi-Oh GX and all that, but I kind of want to focus mostly on, well, really pretty much like the original Yu-Gi-Oh. So basically, the Shadow Realm, it's a very terrifying place. Now, I'm going to say this. I feel like the Shadow Realm kind of really paints a very, very graphic picture that is honestly how the mind of a person who has loneliness, possible certain types of PTSD, autophobia, hell, even throw in like, hardcore like depression, anxiety, like, how do I say this? Like, wait a minute, who's hungry? I think it's Shillet. Anyway, so the Shadow Realm is a very, very terrifying place. So the Shadow Realm, what I'm going to say is the Shadow Realm in the original Yu-Gi-Oh series is a place where if, say, like an evil villain or whatever starts a shadow game, basically the way that this works is the loser of the Shadow Realm game loses their soul. And it's not in like, oh, you just lose your soul and done. So, no, as a matter of fact, it is real physical pain. During a shadow game, damage pretty much isn't just a numerical subtraction of life points when it hits. It hits with full physical impact. Like, you are actually burning. It could be electrocution. Some sort of physical weight when your monster or life points are destroyed, right? The next thing is suffocation and cold isolation. Now, in the Shadow Realm, victims describe the Shadow Realm as an endless freezing void of swirling purple fog. There is floating eyes around and dark specters. It basically feels like you're drowning in the dark where time loses all meaning, leaving the trapped soul in total isolation. Okay? The next thing is psychological and memory decay. So I will say I do have some notes here that I've written down for this. So if you see me not kind of playing the game, I am kind of reading these notes. So the next thing is like, like I said, the psychological and memory decay. The darkness slowly eats away at your identity and sanity. Souls trapped inside or sealed in items, cards, glass, whatever it may be, suffer from amnesia, constant hallucinations, and feeling of endless drifting without control. The next last thing I want to mention is a physical coma in the real world. So to onlookers in the physical world, your body collapses into an unresponsive comatose state or vanishes entirely into the mist. Now, we see this with certain characters like My Valentine, right? Which I am going to speak a lot about in this video. Hence, she is one of my favorite waifu characters. So, here's the thing. So, also I've written this. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I'm not talking about the 4Kids version. I'm talking about the original Japanese version of Yu-Gi-Oh! So in the original, Kazuki, he didn't necessarily call it a shadow realm. He called it the world of darkness, or the underworld, right? Now, the thing I want to mention here is, like, this also is total mind crushes, by the way. Like, say, Yami Yugi, for instance, which is a Tim, literally, shattered the minds of evil opponents, trapping them inside optical illusions or madness. Okay, Kaiba, experiencing constant death by monsters or bandits being buried alive by illusionary gold. Okay. Now, also, this is a literal death. Okay, so characters like Bandit Keith or Merrick's victims were sent to a magical dimension. They were executed, banished to hell, and buried alive in darkness. Okay, this is in the Japanese version. Okay. Now, the 4Kids version actually had to censor this, like, a lot, because the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Is literally the darkest anime on the planet. If you've ever watched or read the manga, you would know what I'm talking about. So, it is no coincidence that the Shadow Realm feels so unsettling, okay? We've got that. It's basically a dark fantasy, so to say, for extreme loneliness or autophobia, fear, psychological and mental pain, and, not being able to be around loved ones. So now that we've got that, so I want to go on this. So I titled this "The Void as Autophobia Made Physical." Okay, when I was writing my notes on this. So autophobia isn't just not liking being alone. It's a panic-driven state where being isolated makes a person feel unsafe, invisible, not heard, or like they are losing grip on reality. Now, in the Shadow Realm, we've got loss of grounding. Victims drift into an endless, formless void with no anchor, no exit, and no concept of time. The other thing I want to mention is the sensory deprivation trap. So when you are trapped inside the physical world, it keeps moving, okay, without you, while you remain trapped in total silence. In real life, severe isolation often feels like standing behind glass while the rest of the world goes on normally, okay? Now, the next thing is the eternal echo chamber, as I've titled this. So this also mean, I also put in parentheses the eyes in the dark. Now, the eyes in the dark in the shadow realm always scared the absolute hell out of me when I was a kid. So, because, I related to it. I related to it way too much as a kid, and I relate to it even more now so as a young adult. Okay? Now, like, the thing is the anime depicts the shadow realm filled with floating eyes and whispering shadow figures. Sorry. Psychologically, severe loneliness, it operates the same way as the shadow realm does. So when a person is completely isolated with no outside connection to ground them, this is when self-criticism takes over, intrusive thoughts, past regrets, self-doubt start to echo endlessly. It feels like a hostile external voices watching and judging you 24/7, okay? Also, you are in constant hyper-awareness state. Autophobia often triggers, most of the time, intense anxiety where every small noise or eternal thought feels terrifying, amplified because there is no external conversation to distract from it. Now, what I want to say is the reason I know so much about this topic, because a lot of people are probably going to say, well, how do you know all this? The reason I know all this is because I live this daily. So, I'm a type of person, I have extreme autophobia, loneliness, depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of this stuff, okay? I have it all. This is a video that, like, I really, really kind of pushed back and back and back and back and back. So, I figured, like, you know what, why not do it? Because, honestly, I've not been streaming because I've been in a state of depression. So the third thing I want to mention is losing your sense of self. So in Yu-Gi-Oh!, spending too long in the Shadow Realm causes characters to lose their memories, identity, and their sanity. This also mirrors real-world long-term social isolation. Human beings are wired for connection. When someone feels entirely isolated for an extended period of time, their self-perception degrades without human interaction to validate their experience, express feelings, or share quiet moments. It becomes incredibly hard to stay grounded in who you are. So, another thing I want to mention is, how do I say this? It's in my personal opinion, the Shadow Realm is like a very, very, very dark version, similar to a dark underworld or a cruel purgatory. Okay, so it's definitely a place I would not want to go. I literally feel like I'm in the Shadow Realm on a daily basis. Like, I literally do. And this sucks. This absolutely sucks because, you can't even, a lot of times you can't focus on things you may need to focus on because, you're like in constant fight or flight mode, man. Like, it's just, it's brutal. Like, very brutal. And, like, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And, it really stinks that people have to go through this because of other individuals, the way they are. Because this is a people problem. It's caused by other people. And all of that. So now I want to get into the darker side. I'm going to try not to make this video be like 2 hours long. Like I say, I really, really want to get my point across with why this is so daunting, why this is so scary, per se. In my personal opinion, I've been craving for Otaku Tavern content evening. Hey, how's it going? So the thing I want to talk about now is My Valentine. Okay, everybody knows that if you've seen Yu-Gi-Oh, My Valentine had the worst shadow game in the entire franchise, right? You know, My Valentine is a character, not only is she one of my waifus, but she's someone that I can really, really relate to on an extremely deep personal level. Like, I literally felt like when I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! The first time, this literally felt like the female version of me. Like, I kid you not. Like, in a lot of the things that she stated, you know, like, she grew up with her parents, you know, that just constantly moving around. They didn't really spend any time with her. You know, she was an outcast, obviously. And the only friends she had were her Harpy Lady cards, right? Like, that was it. And it's like, you know, I can really, really relate to her on that. I really, really do. And I've been able to relate to it since I was a child. And, you know, it just goes to show that, like, you know, there's a lot of people who really relate to this. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! In general really, really touched a lot of things on, like, depression, anxiety, PTSD, you know, seppuku. You know, it touched on a lot of things, man. Like, and, you know, it was so heavily censored on the 4Kids version, but the 4Kids version really got the point across. I mean, a lot of people crap on the 4Kids version, but, like, I mean, the 4Kids version isn't necessarily terrible per se. I mean, I can respect it. I think it's really, really great and all. I really enjoy it, you know, because it really got its point across, you know, without, you know, without being graphic. And that's in that scenario, like with the Shadow Realm, that's really, really amazing to get your point across without, you know, having to, you know, do like the stuff like that, you know, I mentioned a while ago. So, wait a minute, where is this jet dragon? So, you know, when she dueled Merrick, right, she, you know, Yanni Merrick was literally playing games with her. Like, let's not focus on the fact that she almost actually beat him, but let's focus on the psychological trauma and spiritual warfare that overtook her, really, because it's a very brutal thing, man. Like I would not wish that on anyone, man. Like, it's terrible, but, like, you know, she not only lost her memories, but, you know, every time, like, a duelist, either her or Merrick, lost life points or had a monster destroyed, they lost memories of a person they cared about. Now, even though Mai played an incredibly duel and almost technically defeated Merrick, the reason why she could not defeat Merrick was because she did not know the ancient chant to summon the winged dragon of Ra. Had she had known that, she would have won that. Okay? Now, so Maya's a very, very good duelist. Like, she's very good. But anyway, so I want to focus on three key points here from Mai's specific penalty game. And, this, I want to really focus on these. So the first thing I want to focus on is, what happened to Mai wasn't just being casted into an empty black void. So Merrick also tailored her imprisonment specifically to her deepest psychological traumas. Now, the glass hourglass prison is the first thing I want to talk about. So her soul was sealed inside a giant glass hourglass suspended with the dark void. Now, we see eventually Merrick come back to this place, Yami Merrick, and the only thing that is stopping the sand from trickling down, like in the 4Kids version, is Merrick's Winged Dragon of Ra card. So he's sitting here talking to Mai, talking about what kind of pain she's fixing to go through, how her soul is fixing to go under extreme torment, right? And he's relishing the fact of this, Yami Merrick is. And he pulls out the card. Before he pulls out the card, he's like, I'm taking my card back while you sit here and waste away. So he takes his card back and just laughs as the sand starts falling. So this also brings in the slow suffocation thing. So in the 4Kids dub, sand steadily poured out into the hourglass, slowly burying her alive until her 24-hour time limit expired, at which point she would be banished to the Shadow Realm forever. Now, in the Japanese version, this is not the case. Now, in the Japanese version, there was like these little shadow beetles, that would eat away at her mind. And the third thing I want to speak about is the psychological torture. So before losing, Yami Merrick made her forget her friends one by one in her trapped state. She could see characters like Joey, Yugi, Taya standing in the real world outside of her mind, but she could not remember who they were or hear them calling out to her. Now, this honestly is very, very identical to how a person such as I mentioned myself or someone like me is in a constant state of being. Now, when you are constantly lonely, when you constantly have your autophobia acting up, which is constantly triggering your stuff, before I've used anime to cope with depression, negative thinking about myself. Yeah, it's good to do, and Yu-Gi-Oh, like I said, if you stay for the entire stream, you'll understand. Yu-Gi-Oh is one of those very, very special animes that honestly, it's saved my life many of times. I mean, like it's definitely not for the faint of heart if dark things bother you, because Yu-Gi-Oh was created to be dark. It was created to be a message for people who are lonely, who are depressed, who may feel like ending it, or that's what it was created for. And I have a lot of respect for the creator. And the thing is like, Mai is known for her fear of isolation and being alone. So if any anime character has autophobia, it is definitely Mai Valentine. 100%. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, particularly due to her past, though, before meeting Yugi, Joey, and Taya, all of them. And, those fears obviously will resurface after her traumatic experience with America in the Shadow Realm. Now, like I said, she she grew up, pretty in childhood abandonment. She was isolated, neglected from absent parents. She learned early on to build emotional walls, to rely strictly on herself and viewing others with cynicism. However you say that. I don't know how you say that, but cynicism. I'm probably butchering that word, probably not saying it right, but but it's a very scary thing to have to go through day and day after day after day. And it's like, sadly, that is my life. That is a lot of others' lives. And like, it really just goes to show that, these people are genuinely, truly suffering. Like, they really genuinely are. And, like I mentioned before, the Harpy Lady cards are the closest thing she's ever had to real friends before, Yugi, Joey, and all that. Well, her and Joey's kind of like a thing, but technically. But, like... Another thing too is like, the Shadow Realm trigger, like, the traumatic experience in Battle City broke her progress of, trying to overcome this trauma through her friends and Joey, right? So it was it's very hard to watch, man, because it's like, if you're a person like me, you honestly, you can relate. But being trapped in Merrick's Shadow Realm, watching her memories of her friends fade away while buried in complete isolation amplified her deepest fear into basically a full-blown panic. Now, here's what I want to touch on. How painful is the Shadow Realm? The Shadow Realm, in my personal opinion, is probably equivalent to the biblical version of hell. Now, in the biblical version of hell, you obviously have like an isolation of God, anything to do with love, light, or anything good, okay? In a nutshell, that's what that means. So, in the Shadow Realm, it works very, very much like this, except instead of God, it is your loved ones. It is the people you cherish the most. Okay? And, the reason why it's like this is because the Shadow Realm is meant to try to picture. It's trying to put you inside the mind, inside the soul of a person like me, or someone who is extremely lonely, who has autophobia, who may have the deepest, darkest depression going on at that moment in their life, or maybe they've got life-crippling anxiety. It's not fun to go through, and some people stay stuck in a permanent state of just being like in a shadow realm. Like it really, because anytime you have something good happen, anything of light, it's like the shadow realm, the darkness pulls you back down, and then you're back to square one, man. And so how painful is the shadow realm? Well, the first thing is you have sensory overload and shock. So when a monster attacks, the kinetic force, heat, and electricity strikes the duelist's actual body. So, this being said, an attack from a creature like Blue Eyes White Dragon or the Winged Dragon of Ra feels like being blasted by a physical explosion or heavy kinetic blast. The second thing I want to mention is stamina drain. Okay, this is during the shadow game, not in the shadow realm. Now, maintaining high-level monsters or absorbing like heavy direct hits drains a physical energy and life force directly. We see this with Mai. We see this with Joey. We've seen this with all sorts and types of characters who have experienced shadow games, right? And duelists frequently drop to their knees, hyperventilate, or suffer from extreme physical exhaustion as their life points drop. So, like I mentioned before, some of the names who did this. Now, customized stakes. In Yami Merrick's shadow games, it's very, very different. It's actually much, much, much worse than someone, say, like Yami Bakura. So, as far as like the actual shadow game itself. So in Merrick's, the pain was tied to psychological suffering, such as feeling parts of your body disappear or losing vital memories every time you took damage. Now, here we go. Pain after banishment. Trapped in the void, I've titled this. So, once a duelist loses and their soul is cast fully into the shadow realm, the nature of the pain shifts from raw physical injury to endless psychological and spiritual agony. Now, here are types of shadow realm pain. Sensory deprivation and cold, total emptiness, freezing void, and loss of time perception. Okay, second, tailored penalty games. Cruel traps based on deep traumas. An example is Mai's hourglass trap. Now, mental gosh, I'm sorry, my words are going everywhere. Mental disintegration. Slow decay of identity, memories, and sanity. So, honestly, when you look at this, this is very much like the biblical version of hell. It's dark. It's cold, but I know they say hell is hot, but like it's also cold, if that makes sense. Not like cold like you would go outside on a winter's day cold. It's a certain type of cold, evil cold, right? So, like it's not a fun, pleasant experience, and the shadow realm, you hear of people just seppuku and sending themselves, into like a shadow realm state, where their soul goes after death, wherever it goes. Not saying that those people go to hell, by the way, but because I don't necessarily believe that puts you there. But anyway, now the freezing isolation, the dimension is depicted as a cold, weightless void of dark mist where a soul floats indefinitely with no physical reference points. Now, this is very similar to a fearful state of not existing, okay? Could you imagine that? Like a state of where you just don't exist. That's scary. That's very, very, very scary. So, the next thing is psychological decay. Because time has no meaning in the dark dimension, shadow realm, souls trapped inside undergo continuous mental degradation. Now, memories of loved ones, personal identity, sense of self slowly erode, replacing rational thought with severe hallucinations and paranoia. Now, very much true in the autophobia mind, the anxiety mind, the lonely mind. Very, very true. And for customized penalty traps for specific victims, the Shadow Realm just isn't an empty field. It's a personal prison. You know, my Valentine, for instance, was sealed inside a giant hourglass, like I mentioned before, where she experienced the terrifying psychological weight of slowly suffering in isolation while her memories dissolved one by one. Now, the reason I want to say that the Shadow Realm is probably the closest depiction of hell within a series or any kind of entertainment that is out there. And it's crazy that it's that good. It's crazy. But here, so I'm going to compare things. So if a person knows about like the Bible or like I think the Quran talks about this, certain books, right, like that depict hell, they especially like the Bible, hell is basically an absolute separation from God, grace, light, anything pure, love, anything like that, okay? The Shadow Realm, on the instance, absolute separation from loved ones, connection, and light. So very, very similar. It's just some things like have been taken off. So now, obviously, sensory atmosphere. A dark, freezing void of swirling mist and floating specters is the Shadow Realm. The biblical version of hell is outer darkness, a pit of fire and burning sulfur. Now, the duration, okay? In the Shadow Realm, trapped indefinitely until external magic or a savior intervenes. So if you are in the Shadow Realm, the only way to leave said Shadow Realm is if a savior intervenes, like a Tim. Okay? The biblical version is eternal lasting punishment after final judgment. Now, let's move on to the state of being. State of being into the Shadow Realm is the physical body falls into a coma while the soul suffers in the abyss. Hell. The soul and resurrected body in some doctrines experiences torment. Now, obviously you get into total separation is the ultimate punishment in Christian theology. People who are Christian believe in that is what hell is. There is a deceptive thing I'm going to be talking about here momentarily that I've got in my notes that is actually a myth. It's not really literally true. It's metaphorical. So, when hell is often depicted as a lake of fire, in the Bible, it is also described by Jesus himself. It is a place of outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this matches the visual anesthetic of the Shadow Realm, an endless pitch black void of shadow, cold, and psychological distress. Now, the problem here is in the actual version of hell, there is no fire. Now, what I want to mean by this, what I mean by this, getting my words mixed up again, is fire does not exist in the sense that you think it does in hell. Like, so if I go outside and have a bonfire and cook some s'mores, it's not that type of fire, because that type of fire brings light. Okay, so there is no light in a hell realm. There's no light in the Shadow Realm. It's endless, dark, cold void. Now, in the Bible, it talks about the place of outer darkness, and the lake of fire. If you read this, it's a total contradiction if you don't understand what it's actually trying to say and the metaphors in between it. So, in the version of hell, in like scripture is basically it is a black fire. It is a it's not a visible fire. It's not a visible heat. It is not a heat source that brings upon light. It is not a fire that brings upon light. So it is very, very much like the Shadow Realm, like as in John Milton famously wrote in his book Paradise Lost, which is, if you've not read that book, go read it. It's a very good book. He says that the fires of hell produce no illumination at all because you cannot have light in hell if it is a place of outer darkness. Now, another thing I want to touch on is the Shadow Realm works so well as a concept because it isn't just like a fantasy. It is a damn near perfect visual and narrative mirror for the real world mental stress of autophobia, loneliness, being an outcast, depression, anxiety, PTSD, seppuku, all of this, right? Now, like I said, the 4Kids version is heavily, heavily censored because the Shadow Realm was very, very graphic in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga and the original anime. Okay, in like the Japanese anime. So, not the translated versions like that got onto 4Kids. So, in the lore, the Shadow Realm is depicted as a vast freezing abyss of purple mist, total silence, and endless drifting. Victims are severed from their friends and trapped in a space where time loses all meaning. Okay, we've said that many times. So, let's talk about the mental parallel. Now, autophobia and severe loneliness aren't just wanting company. They are an overwhelming, panic-driven dread of being isolated, forgotten, cut off from the world, living with intense loneliness. Feels like existing in a parallel dimension. You can look out at everyone else going on about their normal, happy lives, but you are trapped behind an impenetrable wall of glass where no one can hear you. Okay? And this, obviously being an outcast, the world going on without you, and depression, the decay of identity and memory. Anxiety represents the eyes in the dark. So, like, the eyes, in the dark because, in the lore, the background of the Shadow Realm just is an empty space. It's filled with floating, unblinking eyes, shadow figures, and unnatural sounds. Now, the mental parallel that I wrote for this is a literal visual representation of chronic anxiety. Anxiety makes you feel like you are constantly watched, judged, or surrounded by unseen threats. Even when you are completely alone, the internal eyes in the dark, vigilance, intrusive thoughts, and the constant feeling that something terrible is about to happen never let you rest. So, this is really, really, I'm telling you, the Shadow Realm it's anime's most darkest place. It's the most darkest place I've ever seen in entertainment. Like, it's crazy. But, like, it's absolutely wild, and, when you come back from this, like, say, like, Mai, on the other hand, she had post-traumatic stress disorder, like, because what she went through, like, so after Mai was saved from the Shadow Realm, her ordeal didn't just end. The trauma of being buried alive in the hourglass trap left her deeply scarred, hyper-vigilant, and terrified of being weak or alone again, making her an easy target for darts and the Orichalcos saga to manipulate her in the next arc. Now, this is textbook PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, traumatic events don't just stay in the past. Obviously, they create a lingering shadow realm inside the mind. A person with PTSD can be physically safe in a bright room, but emotionally, they are dragged right back into the darkness of their past trauma when a trigger occurs. Okay, so I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, right? Another thing too, like take for instance, when Kaiba and Mokuba and Yugi's grandpa were stuck in the Shadow Realm with Pegasus. He transferred their souls into cards, bro. Like, they obviously went through very, very psychological stress in the mind. I was just thinking about that. Ma being trapped in the Shadow Realm. Yeah, I've been talking about Ma in the Shadow Realm a lot in this video. Like I said, I mentioned that in the beginning. But yeah, like I said, I really, really relate to my Valentine quite a lot. Not only is she one of my waifus, like I said, but I really, really relate to her probably a lot more than most anime characters. And I relate to thousands of anime characters. Thousands. Tens of thousands. And, but honestly, Maya's one of the number ones that really, really stick out to me. Because I know what it's like to be in her shoes. I know. And I live it daily. Just like she does. And, so, I'm telling you, Kazuki Takahashi, man, when he created Yu-Gi-Oh!, I mean, rest in peace to that guy, he knew what he was doing. Like, he knew what he was doing. Like, I remember watching this when it first came on, and I really, really related to Yugi, because he was lonely. He didn't have any friends, and then he found friends in this Duel Monsters game. And it's a very personal anime for me, really, I guess. Like it's very, very good. But yeah, like, that he had a lot of stuff going on with the original, what they call the Shadow Realm. But it's called the World of Darkness, the Dark World, the Dark Void, so whatever, right? And honestly, from the time I wake up, it's like, I have to remember, oh, I'm in the Shadow Realm. And it is absolutely brutal. Like, it's so brutal. Like, it even makes you lose the will to live, like, a lot of times. Like, you like, it's really, really rough, man, y'all. Like, it's really, really rough. And I really don't wish this on anyone. Like, but that's something I've had to deal with, my entire life. And so this video is a pretty personal video. So if you've ever seen Yu-Gi-Oh! And you've seen what the Shadow Realm looks like in both versions, or even just one, that is how I am on a daily basis. When it comes to whether it's loneliness, autophobia, depression, etc. And, you know, like, really, um, how do I say this? Um, I really empathize with Mai. You know, I feel like now I would connect with all of my waifus, right? But I feel like if Mai was sitting here in person, I would have, you know, we would both have this very, very deep connection. Because, and I'm not just talking like a romance wise, like I'm talking like a psychological level. Because, you know, we've literally been through the same thing, so it's like we're obviously going to understand each other's fears, hurts, pain, isolation, etc., and would be each other's cure for that, right? Now, here's the problem, though. I'm going to speak real world for a minute. In the real world, it's not like the anime. People who feel like they are constantly in a shadow realm state, they don't have any people that are the savior that come and rescue them out of the shadow realm, more than likely. At least I don't. I mean, I'm talking about people that are not online. But, you know, like, it just goes to show, man, like, it's really rough. Hang on, let me... Come on, Dazzy. Said stay in there. Give me 1 second, y'all. There we go. Okay, so, like, it's brutal, man. Like, I mean, every day I feel like I'm living in the shadow realm. So, if, like, you know, if you ever had to go into the shadow realm, it would be something that you just physically could not do, man. Like, you obviously would not be able to do it. It would be very bad. Like, and yet certain people live in in a shadow realm. And you know what happens to them? A lot of people that do this, they self-delete, you know, and I really wish they could have got help. But it's very it's a very daunting thing. It's very very dark. It's very dark and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one here. I mean, there is a lot more that I could say, but like I'm sure you get the picture. You know, honestly, this Earth feels like a shadow realm. Like in certain ways, but you know, especially when you got the mind, you know, and you have all these problems, whether it be autophobia, loneliness, or depression or anxiety or PTSD. Like, it's rough, man. It's rough, and definitely try to seek help in any way you can. Obviously, I do want to end the video on this note. I know that can really feel like you just can't find it. I mean, I'm in the same boat, but at least keep looking. You know, and try to focus on the reasons you do have the will to live, etc. Right? But like, yeah. Anyway, let me know if you like this type of setup of video topics. This is something new that I want to do. I want to do quite a lot of videos, very like this. Compare things to certain anime worlds or whatever, and really just kind of dissect, you know, some things. But if you really like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and make sure you share it. Share it with someone, right? If you have people to share it with, share it. Like I said, I feel like, you know, in my personal opinion, this is the best video I've done yet. I mean, that could be just from a bias standpoint because it's very personal to me, or, you know, it could be that it's about anime. But I think it's because of what it's about, and it's just a really good video that really needs to be heard by people who are outcasted otakus, right? You know, they could be going through the same thing. So yeah, anyway, with that all out of the way, I'm going to end this one here, and yeah, so I will probably edit this video. This video will become private as soon as I end the stream, because I plan on editing this video, and I'm going to post a picture over the screen. I know I didn't play the game too much because I was reading my notes, but I'm going to post a picture of what the Shadow Realm looks like within the anime. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, obviously you've already seen it at the time this gets re-uploaded. But anyway, without further ado, thanks for all who watched this, who tuned in. Yeah, when the video gets back up, make sure you share it. Yeah, anyway, so with all that said, like, subscribe maybe, and I will see you all next time. Peace.